The dust cloud raised by the explosion was dissipating, and a few moments later, the emerald light of a protective barrier appeared. Tanya's lips curled into a smirk. Coo, just as expected. They prepared properly this time. Well, it doesn't matter. It won't help them anyway. Even though she couldn't swat the guests immediately, it didn't particularly worry her. Everything was going according to plan. By striking the first blow, she had seized the initiative. Now the opponents wouldn't be able to act as they pleased and were forced to be on guard. Not to mention that they were on her personal battlefield, where the war would be waged according to her rules. However, something still worried Tanya. She shifted her gaze to the side and peered at the second barrier, a huge sphere of ice permeating cold. A few cracks had appeared on its surface, but that was all. And this was considering that the explosion of holy power had occurred right next to them. This was alarming. The church members had also prepared quite well. Behind Tanya, space rippled and a portal opened. 3 figures emerged from it, a blonde priest, a blonde fallen angel girl, and a giant in black armor. Whoa, yeah, baby. Now that's what I understand. Boss, you're definitely not as simple as you look, even for a shrimp. Maybe I made the right decision. Tanya frowned at his statement. Father Freed, it's just beginning. Don't relax. The opponents are not so simple, and they outnumber us. I certainly don't care if trash like you gets your head torn off, but it could have unpleasant consequences for the operation as a whole. Oh, I'm scared. The little boss is cold as always. He feigned fear, but noticing Tanya's reaction, he cut himself short. Okay, can't even make a joke? I get it. Just follow the plan, right? His face twisted into a bloodthirsty grin. I don't care, because I feel like I'm going to have some real fun today. His tongue excitedly ran over his lips. Damn maniac. Just let him try to pull something and he'll regret it later. All right, enough idle chatter. Commencing operation. Everyone get ready. 0 first, do you copy? Tanya shouted into her headset. Attack on my signal. Zzz. Reception is excellent. Roger that, goddess, came the reply. Yoshi, what about the object? I hope the brother was delivered to the right place and our fighters can pick him up. Tanya turned to the giant on the left. 2 flickering lights through the slits of the dark helmet looked back in response. Affirmative, Ane-san. The object, plus 1 more unit accompanying him, of an unknown creature, are in position. Unit of a creature. Tanya strained her mind trying to remember who he meant, but her brain desperately resisted this diabolical act. Whatever, it shouldn't be a problem. Tanya abandoned the attempt and proceeded to the next stage. Good. Hey, Partridge. Tanya turned to the blonde with black wings. Your main task is support. Don't show off and don't get involved. You will act only according to my instructions. Understood? The girl flinched when the gaze shot through her body and nodded like a bobblehead. Tanya noticed the green glow of the barrier beginning to fade and the ice sphere crumbling. A dozen more figures appeared behind them. As expected, here come the reinforcements. To drag all the uninvited guests into the barrier, Tanya had to expand the range of her holy aura, cranking it to full power. That way, she was able to identify and lock on to the necessary targets. Whether church members or especially demons, they all had a specific reaction to this aura, which she utilized. At first, she wanted to knock out the command with the first blow and then finish off the scattered forces. But, as expected, it wasn't that simple. They were truly prepared. Finally, they began to act, and 2 figures, separating from the main mass, rushed in their direction. The rest of the demons, cuckoo, just as I thought, the performance went off with a bang. They rushed toward the church members. That's right. Tanya took into account that they didn't trust each other and were always at each other's throats, so she tried to pit them against each other immediately, creating the appearance of her own involvement with them. She learned this and other useful information about faction relations from her newly acquired human resources. Start the operation, Tanya shouted into her headset. Roger. The fallen angel's hands shone with purple light, and 2 portals opened on the enemy's flanks, where fighters in full gear drove out on brand new BMPs. Boom, boom, boom. Bam, bam, bam. Rat, rat, rat. The crackle of machine gun bursts and the roar of explosions rained out immediately. Yes, there they are, the beauties. BMP, Infantry Fighting Vehicle, standard Army equipment. Tanya wouldn't have been able to get them herself, but with Levy-chan's help, it became possible. It wasn't in vain that she had to humiliate herself after all. She squeezed everything possible out of Levy-chan, both equipment and new gear with ammunition filled to the brim. These stocks should last for a while. Meanwhile, two figures were approaching them at high speed. Tanya called up the opponent's statuses. Status: Name: Diodora Astaroth. Race: Demon, pureblood. Age: 17. Level: 41. Status: Heir to the House of Astaroth. Title: Arrogant Prick. Evolutionary Index: C. Status: Name: Marcus. Race: Demon, former human. Age: 138. Level: 53. Status: Knight of the Head of the House of Astaroth. Title: Self-proclaimed Teacher. Evolutionary Index: C. Note: Knight effect active. Agility multiplied by 2. Appraisal leveled up just in time. Now Tanya could see more information. So that's how it is. A little demon and some guy. Ho ho, the second one isn't so simple. What a level. That's almost the ceiling of his C-rank evolutionary index. As she thought, he would be tough to deal with. Wait, and further, how much agility? 144? What a damn monster! Tanya herself only had a base of 45. Well, higher under buffs, of course. But this guy? Consider it basically twice as much as hers. Yeah, they really prepared quite well. No way. Close combat with him is definitely out. Well, never mind. There are countermeasures for this case. Yoshi, you take the guy with the sword. He was a suitable opponent for him. Maybe he lost badly in speed, but Yoshi wasn't so easy to kill. He should be capable of holding him back, and she would provide cover. Freed, hold off Diodora for a while. Don't let them work together. I hope trash like you is capable of at least that. Tanya gave him a withering look. Heh, don't worry, little boss. I've always wanted to screw that bastard. Lick. He licked his lips excitedly. Maybe I can't chop him into salad myself, but with the new toys, heh. He lovingly stroked the bandoliers of daggers on his chest and the bag on his belt stuffed to the brim with more toys. It won't be hard to singe his face a little. Yes, correct, Tanya decided, to use this maniac as cannon fodder. Among the main fighters, not counting the rank and file, he was the weakest. However, he had considerable combat experience, as well as the ability to act competently and according to the situation. He was also surprisingly cautious. He certainly wasn't an opponent for Diodora, but he was capable of delaying him for a while until they dealt with the most dangerous element. Therefore, Tanya equipped him fully so that he would have at least some chance not to kick the bucket and hold out longer. Now the Holy Father, like the partridge, was in a black uniform, like all the fighters. Freed was best with cold weapons, especially he liked the light enchanted daggers of her production, so he took a dozen at once, tying himself up with them like a Christmas tree. And what was he going to do with them? Okay, that didn't matter. The main thing was results. Start. Tanya soared into the air. At her command, Freed fired a grenade launcher at the two approaching figures. Boom! The magically enhanced charge exploded upon hitting the target. A wave of heat swept through the area, raising a cloud of dust. At the same time, Yoshi rushed forward, followed by the Holy Father. The partridge vanished from the battlefield via teleport. Yeah, she was too weak to participate in the battle directly, so she would only be in a support role, managing portals. This way, the fighters could move across the entire battlefield if necessary. And, thanks to a special barrier, only her fighters possessed such a privilege. Enemy teleportation abilities, or sealed. Tanya's new skill, energy structure analysis turned out to be even more useful than she thought. She was finally able to analyze the spell structure in the mansion's basement and recreate a spatial barrier with the same capabilities using the system. It was entirely her battlefield, and on it, she had absolute territorial advantage.
Marcus POV. Boom! A deafening explosion rang out. The entire field of vision was shrouded in a cloud of boiled air, but the blast wave went to the side. Marcus, covering the young master with his body, managed to block the deadly charge saturated with considerable light power. Cold sweat broke out on Marcus's forehead at this sight. Who would have thought that the opponents would possess such overwhelming light power? Marcus was a very experienced fighter. For several decades now, he had served the House of Astaroth as the personal bodyguard of the head of the house. He had seen a lot in his life, and it was not easy to surprise him, let alone scare him. However, looking at the user of holy power in front of him, a chill inevitably ran down his spine. A little girl who could hardly be given 10 years possessed such power? When the head of the house first entrusted him with the protection of the young master, he didn't think it would go this far. No, of course, he didn't underestimate the enemy. He didn't have such a luxury. In his entire life, he had seen a lot and witnessed all sorts of things, especially considering that the enemy who was able to suppress all the young master's pieces and seriously wound him was clearly not simple. But even in his wildest guesses, he could not have thought that it would turn out to be a 10-year-old girl. First, a sudden attack with light power of simply crazy magnitude, and then forced confinement in a spatial barrier. Everything happened so fast that he didn't have time to come to his senses, and this was despite the fact that he was constantly on guard and told the young master the same. All that remained for him was to use the artifact entrusted by the head to protect the young master. If not for it, they would have all been disintegrated into dust. He was absolutely sure of this. The behavior of the church members also raised questions, and, as the young master noted, the strongest holy aura of their opponent. Marcus knew perfectly well that church members could not be trusted, but even he did not expect such a bold setup from them. And indeed, just as the young master said, if they were gotten rid of here, no traces would remain. Now they were inside a high-class spatial barrier. There was no connection with the outside world. One could neither exit nor enter. If they were pinned down here, everything could be written off on the same unknowns who staged that explosion in the middle of the city. Was this a ploy by the church members? Unexpected that they decided to act so boldly. Did they really want a new war? Many thoughts spun in his head, but right now the main task was to protect the young master. This was his duty as a bodyguard. However, thoughts about the culprit herself just wouldn't leave his head. If this is indeed the work of the church, then the little girl in front of him, where did the church members dig her up? Raised her? Or no, created her? Bad rumors had reached him about such experiments. To be capable of such things at such an age? The representative of the church who arrived, Siegfried, inspired roughly the same feelings, and if he could still accept the existence of the latter and had heard of him, he knew nothing about this person. However, her abilities combined with her age, she is a real monster. Young master, do not act rashly. These are clearly not simple opponents. We will have to combine forces and act cautiously. Continuing to hold the barrier of demonic energy, he turned his head to Diodora. But he seemed not to hear. His face was twisted in a ghastly grimace, and his eyes burned with fire. Marcus, I don't care how you do it, but you must kill her. Understood? He growled in response, turning with bloodshot eyes. These church members must pay for everything. However, the rest can wait. The main thing is her. He ran his hand over his scar. Marcus only shook his head, sighing tiredly. It seemed it would be difficult to force him to act more cautiously. As soon as the pressure on the barrier began to weaken, he realized it was time to act. In one thing, his master was right. No matter who the opponent is, they must be eliminated. And this is his task, even if the opponent is a little girl. And even if she has such abilities, she is still too young.
Given her potential, in a few years, she would undoubtedly be a dangerous opponent, a monster worse than Siegfried. Perhaps she could even stand on par with the absolute number one of the church, Giulio Gesualdo. But now, Marcus was sure he could get rid of her without problems. The pressure completely disappeared, and Marcus drew his sword from its scabbard. His eyes flashed with a dangerous glint. But before he began to act, boom! A heavy blow struck the barrier as if from a multi-ton battering ram, and it rippled. He tried to determine the source, but the surroundings were still shrouded in a cloud of dust, and it was impossible to see anything, and magical perception in this strange barrier was severely limited. However, a moment later, a palm wrapped in a matte black gauntlet came into his field of vision. It was the source of the increasing pressure, and Marcus tensed. But still, it wasn't the kind of pressure that would pose a threat to the barrier. Just as he was about to act, something strange happened again. His demonic energy, poured into the barrier, began to dissipate sharply, as if something was absorbing it, and in the next instant, the barrier cracked like glass, and a massive figure encased in black armor flew out of the dust cloud. It seemed the opponents had some more trump cards. The figure jerked toward them. "Young master!" Bam! Marcus barely managed to block the sudden dash, and a blow of crazy force struck the sword, knocking him back several tens of meters. It seemed to Marcus that his hands went numb. What power! But before he could come to his senses, the figure rushed at him again. Marcus just sneered. Fool. If he had attacked the young master, it would have been hard. However, if he wants to measure strength with him... The giant flew up close and attacked again. Boom! The ground cracked. A 10-meter crater was formed from the giant's blow. However, Marcus's figure simply blurred in the air, and a moment later appeared behind him. A lightning-fast thrust of the sword aimed at the joint of the armor. It doesn't matter how strong you are, if you can't react to an attack, you're finished. But at the moment he wanted to deliver the fatal blow, a cold chill ran down his back. The sense of danger howled. Marcus immediately used a rapid movement technique and appeared 10 meters away from the giant.
Boom, 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 boom. A hail of explosions struck the place where he had recently been standing. Residual waves of holy power tingled his skin unpleasantly. Frowning, he looked up. In the air, wrapped in a halo of golden light, hovered the figure of the girl in the exquisite white dress. An automatic rifle was in her hands, aimed at him, and her pupils burned with a dangerous glint. An innocent smile, which in other circumstances could make flowers bloom, now for some reason looked like the grin of a true first-generation demon lord. Looking into her eyes, a slight shiver ran through Marcus's body again. Never would he have thought that he would have to fight against children. Although he had seen much in his decades of existence as a demon, he felt such a bloodlust only from true monsters. What did they do to her in the church? He wondered for a moment, but immediately pushed these thoughts away with an effort of will. On the battlefield, it doesn't matter who the opponent is. Enemies must be eliminated, whoever they may be, even such as these. Rat-a-tat-tat. A new burst of gunfire rang out, and bullets saturated with light rushed toward Marcus. His silhouette blurred again. Boom, boom, boom. A new series of explosions saturated with holy power followed, but as soon as he stopped moving, the sense of danger howled again. Bam! A blow of crazy force struck his sword. His hands went numb, and Marcus was blown to the side. I didn't feel him at all. What kind of gear is this? Moreover, some lethargy appeared in his body as soon as he took the blow. This seemed strange to Marcus, but as soon as he checked his condition, his eyes widened in shock. What the hell? My demonic energy reserve has decreased. Before he could finish this thought, the sense of danger came from above again, and he was forced to dodge. Leaving only after images behind, he constantly had to escape from under the hail of attacks. He didn't have the luxury of letting his guard down for even a second. Superb teamwork, allowing them to hold back even an opponent like him.
The girl restricted his movements with precise shots, and the big guy in armor finished him off. The strangest thing was that he didn't feel him at all and could only fix him visually. Magical perception didn't react to him at all, but constant attacks from the air saturated with holy power didn't allow him to focus on him. It had been a long time since he found himself in such a difficult situation. Perhaps just slightly difficult. "It seems I'll have to get a little more serious," he muttered, and tongues of scarlet flame engulfed his body. He gave himself entirely to his native element of fire, entering his completed combat form.